Chapter 28, setting up cross-section, named boundaries, and sheets. And now that you've set up plan sheets, you should have somewhat of an idea how this process works with name boundaries. It's definitely a little different though because it's with a model. And so we need to create our name boundary actually in a 3D file, which is a little different, or the 3D model within a 2D file, I should say. Okay, let's see, we left off in this sheet plan profile. Let's go ahead and create a new file in order to place our name boundaries. All right. So in order to do that, we're going to go to New. We want to path out to your student folder, CAD Sheets, and we'll use that same file naming convention with the difference being we're going to change the name from Plan Profile Sheet to cross section. So I'm just going to go X-sect, or of course we always use our IDOT standard file naming conventions. So I'm not going to look it up in the CAD manual. I believe that's what it is. Let's go with that for now. Let's save it. Oh no. What did I do? Okay, down here, yeah, it's correct. That's the correct seed file. Again, I'm going to change that to cross-section. Hit save. There we go. And it should save it and then open the file for us. Of course, it's really just a blank seed 2D file at this point. So the first thing that you need to do is reference in a few files. You're going to need basically anything that you want to show up in the cross section. So we should be pointing to the design folder. So let's bring in our existing terrain, which in turn will visualize our existing ground line in the cross section ultimately, right? Our alignment, probably most importantly, our corridor. We also need to bring in our right-of-way because remember it's going to be looking for that 3D model of the right-of-way. Topo and super, yeah, we would not need any of these. Design file, really just those. So terrain model, alignment, corridor, and right-of-way. And then we didn't cover this in the Road 1, we'll cover it in Road 2, but then for any of your underground utilities, whether it be drainage related like storm sewers and pipe culverts or any of that, or it be like utilities like fiber optics or basically anything underground like that, we are going to learn to use the drainage and utility feature within ORD, and then that will be in its own 3D model. So the way cross sections work is that basically anything that you want to show up in your permanently visualized cross section would be you need to make sure that that file is attached, and then ultimately it's going to look at the 3D model of that file in order to visualize whatever it is. We're just going to be setting up the boundary at at certain stations. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit open so I attach all these reference files. And I'll do a fit view, zoom into my job down here. And in order for this to work, you need to have the 3D model opened in order for it to work. And as you can see right now, there is no 3D model, right? It's just a 2D file, there's only default. And so why is that? Why when I open this 2D file, is there not a 3D model within the 2D, right? And remember that we said that there has to be something in the 2D that has a Z value, in order for it to know to create that 3D model within the 2D file, right? And so one way of doing that would be, and something you need to do anyway, and that is when you bring in your existing terrain model. And remember, we said it's better to use that first button where it says new, because then when I hover over, click it one time, it should pop up. There you go. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get that heads up display, I guess that's what you call it, to pop up. I'm going to click on set. That is my active terrain. And so now there is a Z value, right? So now when I click on my models, I can see that a default 3D model was created. And so now I can right click, go to view control, and then bring up that, it automatically brings up that view number 2, which is pointing to the 3D model. And remember, if I want to work in this file or this view, so then it switches my tools as they would work as if I was actually sitting in the 3D model. If I was to come over here and select that 3D view and actually open that model and get into it, it's kind of the same thing. It just allows you to very quickly, jump back and forth. And then, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it even allows you to work in that view, and it treats it more like a 2D view. This it's a little different, but like for instance, I guess what I'm saying is that let's say you're doing some work here in the 2D view, and you can see in the 3D view what it was that you want to start from that point, but you really only want the XY, right? Well, even though that the blue is highlighted in this view, see, I can snap to any point, data point to accept, and look what it did. It actually started drawing for me in the 2D view. So it used the X and Y from that, and allowed me to do that even though I was in the 2D view. I don't think that's something I mentioned earlier. It's not really related to setting up sheets, but it just occurred to me that I don't think I've mentioned that so far. That's something that you probably would want to know. It's not something you have to know, but it's just another thing that as you learn this, you'll keep learning more and more and more, and becoming more and more efficient, really, as you learn all these little tricks. Okay, so like I said, in order to set up my cross-section sheets, my cross-section boundaries for the sheets, I need to have this 3D view set up. Okay, I'm going to be working over here in this 2D view, but the 3D view has to be open in order for this to work. Okay, so here's how we go about that process. It starts off kind of similar to the plan view stuff. We go to drawing production, name sheet, or name boundaries, place a name boundary, and then let's see, so far in previous chapters I should say, we used the plan view icon, the profile icon, and then the fourth one over is civil cross section. So that's the one we're going to be using right now, that one right there. So your drawing seed, so you need to know what scale you're going to be using. And I would say by far, the most common would really be 5 and 10. I would say 5's probably the number one most common, but 10's also very common. It really just, it depends on a couple things. It depends on how wide your cross-section is going to be, and making this determination is really not an ORD thing. It's something you've always had to do when thinking about even setting up your geopag cross-sections. You got to decide on what scale is most appropriate. Of course, we like to go with the smaller scale as much as possible because you can see a whole lot more, right? It's larger on the sheet, but sometimes you don't want to have a a match line, and you just want the entire cross section to show up on your sheet, so you choose to go 10 scale. Let's go 5 scale for this. Either one would be fine though, but in this case, I think for now we're just going to go 5 scale. So 5 scale landscape. Going to be creating this new group. I mean, you could name that group if you like. You know, maybe mainline cross sections. And then start and stop location. So really just like plan view, I'm going to select the alignment that I want my cross sections to be associated to. And so really this is very similar to setting up plan sheets. I'm starting at that very beginning. I'm going to accept it there. And then notice as I move my cursor left to right, I'm seeing all the cross sections that are going to be created. And this is all, you know, by default, you can see the interval is set to 50, which is, you know, the most common for setting up cross sections. For training purposes, maybe we don't want quite so many. I don't know. We could set that to 100 if we don't, for training purposes, so we don't have, you know, you still learn the concept, but we don't have a gazillion cross sections. Yeah, so that looks good. We're going to go with this probably more for like a road 2 type thing. We could take this further, a little bit more advanced. I could show you about this event point list, which is actually pretty nice, but we don't want to get into that in the Road 1 class. But that basically let's say in addition to these intervals, that you have these set locations that, you know, you want an additional cross section that's not at an even increment, like say a side road or pipe culvert or something like that. It's not necessary to use the event list, because we can go back and add cross sections one at a time, no problem. But maybe you're just, you know, thinking, hey, you'd just like to get this list together one time, and then you might use it for other things too, and then it's just, you know, it all comes down to efficiency type thing. And then it asks you, do you want to include your control points, such as, I don't know, I think it will, if you want to have a cross section exactly at the PC, PT, you know, those kinds of things. They're kind of like cardinal points. I believe that's what it is. I don't normally check that, but if you wanted those, that's what you would do. It's got the ability to go, you know, backwards facing. I'm not sure why. I've never done that before. If you wanted to do it, you could. I normally don't. And then just like plan sheets, we can toggle right now create drawing, or we can come back and do that later. And I almost always do it later. And so, yeah, I want to end at the end of the project, say. Or you could go, maybe you want to go beyond and get yourself, you know, a couple existing cross sections. That's probably a good idea. Let's do that. And so I'm just going to data point somewhere kind of beyond, and then data point to accept. And right when I do that, you can see that this is pretty nice. It's pretty neat, really. It gives you this sheet boundary. Not sheet boundary, I keep saying that. It gives you the boundary of the cross section. And really, just like the plan view, remember I said even after you place these things, you can go in and modify it. You know, like maybe it's not picking up everything. It's not, you need to pull it up higher, you know, something like that. You know, in that case, you can expand, you know, I can still modify it. Make it wider, make it taller, you know, do whatever. Maybe it didn't pick up my utilities because I haven't placed my utilities yet. You don't want to redo your sheets border, so you come back. You just expand that, and really, somewhat like the plan sheet, it'll automatically redefine that area. Now, if you think about that, though, if you've already have your, I know we haven't set up sheets yet, but if you expand that, well, now that cross section is going to take up more space. And normally when you do that, um, what you would do in that case, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but this is very similar to plan sheets where when we do create that drawing, it's going to do the same thing as the plan sheet did. It's going to create a drawing model for every one of these cross-section boundaries, and that's where we do the annotation. And then it's also going to take those models and place them on cross-section sheets. So it's going to put multiple models on the cross-section sheets. And so what we would do if we did happen to go back and make modifications to this, we would go into, I'm really getting ahead of myself here, shouldn't probably do that. But it's hard to say where do you start on all this. But I would go in, and you're going to see all your sheets here. I would open up the models. I would delete out all the sheets models, and then I would reprocess the sheets against the models, and then it would put all my cross sections in order. Or maybe I added cross sections or modified how much of the cross section that I'm showing. So if that was the case, I don't need to delete the cross section drawing. All I need to do is delete the sheets, reprocess the sheets, and then it puts all the cross sections in order, and then puts the appropriate number of cross sections on the sheet. Okay, so we always learn way better by seeing than hearing, right? So I talked about it now, but now let's go do all this stuff we're talking about. Okay, so we've got the boundary out there. And that's at that even increment. If we had entrances, we would probably want those cross sections at those odd locations. If we had existing pipe culverts, we would probably want to have a cross section at those locations or proposed pipe culvert locations. We haven't developed any of that ourselves, but we could still learn the concept, I guess, at this point. Just learn the fact that you can go back and place additional boundaries even after you've gotten out of this tool, and we can go back to place that cross section boundary, and then on our interval, if we wanted to do these individually, I could just set that at a 0. And I just noticed something I should probably point out, because okay, IDOT, if you're doing work for IDOT, almost always they exaggerate their cross section in the y-axis by 2, almost all the time. Hardly, there's certain cases where you don't. There's so much relief, but by default they generally do. It's been my experience so far in the consultant world that we do not exaggerate our cross sections by 2. So I guess what I'm saying is you may or may not, but be aware that this dialog by default is set to 2. So you may want to switch that to 1. In fact, I think what I will do is I'm just going to delete all these boundaries, and then I think I'm going to redo this at a 1. Being as this is a county job, and that's just typically what we do. So I just went into that 3D model and deleted, all those sheets. Let's see, did they already show up here? No, good. So when I deleted them there, they showed up, or don't show up in these name boundaries yet. Okay, so let's actually go back, and I'm going to change that vertical exaggeration to 1. I'm going to leave the interval set to 100, and then let's go ahead and place those boundaries one more time. And so like we said, we are going to data point on the alignment. I'm going to go to the very beginning. I might go past. So I pick up a couple existing cross sections. Data point to accept. And then I want to add a few additional ones. So now I'm going to change that interval to 0. Oh, I can't change it. Thought I could at this point. 0. Maybe not. Maybe I may need to create the drawing models first. Not positive on that. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. That may or may not be the case here. I just want to keep moving along. So I'm going to hit this button here, and see. See now, I in the name boundaries, I see every boundary that I created here, right? And so let's go ahead and select the default name it gave it. Right click on it. And at this point, let's just create just the drawings, not the sheets yet. So create cross-section drawings. So it brought up this dialog again, just because we had that toggled over there. And this all looks fine. Again, like the plan sheets, I'm not going to toggle add to sheet index. I'm just going to say OK. And so now it's only creating the drawing models. I told it I did not tell it to also create the sheets yet, because we know that we want to go back and add some additional cross sections at some odd locations. So that may take a second. It's creating 22 cross sections. Oh, I guess I did have sheets toggled on. Whoops. It doesn't matter. We can, like I said, we can delete those later and reprocess after we add these. Okay, so let's just go to our drawing models, which the naming convention is just the same thing as our plan sheets was. The drawing ones just say view, the sheets view say sheets. And so the way the cross sections work is for every cross section we have a drawing model. And so there is your cross section. Now I know it looks like these are geopack cross sections. Like, these are very much not geopack cross sections, okay? What you're seeing here is not real, so to speak. I don't know how else to describe it. What you see here is a live view of the model at these sections. What you're seeing here, this is not drawn in this file. See that Earth shoulder right there? It looks like somebody drew an Earth shoulder. That is not, it's not there. It's not drawn there. It's like a live camera, really, within, in that 3D model that we just looked at. Let's go back to it for 1 second. And think about this. And of course, we could use our display styles like we learned. And we always said the most common ones, ignore illustration, ignore lighting. Okay, so what you're seeing there is this name boundary. Think of it really like a camera. And the second you go into any of the files that are in 3D, that have been created in that 3D model, and you have that 3D model reference to this file, those elements are going to show up. So that's what it is. It's kind of deceiving in a way. It's kind of cool too in a way, the fact that to think that it's live, to think that you go in and you make a change to the model, or you think about this, you go in and you change the proposed profile, you raise it 3 inches. Just think about, or make any kind of change. Just think about how much work that was in the past. But what happens when you go in and change that active profile? Well, the model is looking at the active profile. So now you change the profile. So now the model is processed, right? And so it now automatically changes to, when you get into that file, it'll process it, or if you were just sitting in a file, you can hit the process button. It'll process it against it, make the change. You get into your cross sections, the change is already made. It's like incredible. It's the efficiency that this brings is just, it's pretty amazing. The one thing that it doesn't do, well, let me start to say, the one thing it did do automatically for us is that because when we just now processed this, we had annotation toggled on, so it automatically gave us all these the default annotations, And how did that work? Well, defaults IDOT's environment, if you use their standard point naming conventions, and that's why when creating your templates, we would encourage you to use those built-in IDOT naming conventions, because if you do, then a lot of your labeling is going to be done for you, automatically. I mean, you could still go back and delete it if you didn't want it, redo your own, do whatever. But this is very, nice little time savings that it automatically does this. And you can see over there that it automatically placed my existing right-of-way and my proposed right-of-way. And why did that work? How did that work? Well, I had that right-of-way file referenced in, right, when we started. And when you reference in the 2D, it also brings in the referenced 3D with it. So it knows exactly, where, it knows the right-of-way there. It knows it's there because of the feature definition. It knows where to place these annotations based on, the origin here. And in this case, we profiled the right-of-way to be the terrain, right, which is that existing ground line, and so it knows to start drawing it there. And so that's kind of how these things come about. But okay, getting back to, I was saying that annotation happens automatically. Now, and then I said, if you change the profile, that the cross sections update. Now, one thing that does not update automatically is the annotation. So what you would need to do, if you did make some kind of major change like that to the model, all you need to do is go up to this model annotation, click remove, and then say yes or no. Do you want all the models or not? And there we go. And I just realized I'm doing the same thing I did with the plan sheets. I kind of went on and went over where I wanted to go with this. I mainly just wanted to talk about setting up sheet boundaries. I really didn't want to get into really setting up the sheets, but you saw by accident there. I did that, and then now I'm talking about labeling, which really should be a separate chapter, I think. Let's look to see what we had. Yeah, see, we have a separate chapter for annotating cross sections. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually let's finish talking about setting up boundaries first. So let's go back to our default, and let's end the chapter by saying how you would have added additional boundaries. So we hit our name boundaries, and now I think this will let us change interval to 0, and it doesn't for some reason. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's see if we can figure this out together here. And so for our group, maybe I just need to get out of this completely. Actually, I think what I will do is I'm going to set this up so I think we're at 30 minutes already. Let's stop this chapter here, and I'm going to have kind of a 2-part series for setting up boundaries at these irregular stations. So we will stop the chapter here.